have a successful 2020, we got to make sure we're having godly expectations. And then to wrap up this section of just like godly expectations and how to have a great 2020, there is one thing that I feel I want to discuss that I think is so important in us moving forward to have a great 2020. And it comes off the heels of us thinking about this. You know, I was reading in the Time magazine, it talked about how Americans work more than any other industrial nation in the world. Americans, we work more than any other industrial nation in the world. We have less time off, more hours in office, and less vacation time. Does anyone feel that? Okay, some of you guys are, I think China. It is documented. It is documented that it is the U.S. It is the U.S. I didn't think so. I hear you. I didn't think, but it is documented the U.S. This is us. We do not use vacation. No, we don't. I take it. Actually, I take more than vacation. You know, and this, of course, can have, obviously, this mindset and living this type of life can have, obviously, negative effects on all of us, right? Negative consequences on our health, chronic stress, and even our family values and our family lives, right? And why is it that it seems like we work so hard? Why? I'm asking. Oh, it's okay, you can answer. Why do we work so hard?
I feel like a lot of Americans receive sort of like a sense of pride from overworking themselves.
That's a good one, right? It's a sense of pride. It's kind of like, you can kind of boast on it, like, oh, you only work this way. Well, I did. You know, and it's like, I am, obviously, because I work harder than you, I am better, right? That's just a thought, bro.
Yeah, I think it's because the way the system is carved. The system is carved in the way that you are compared to work and live up to the standard of the society.
That's true, right? It could be systematic in a sense, where it's like it's built in, and your value is the product of your work. You know what I mean? Like in your work ethic and how you do things, right? Go ahead.
I mean, to piggyback off that, I think it's also America has learned to do things cheaper. More hours, less money. More hours, less people to get it done. And so I think that's where many of us are. And you want a job, so you keep burning the midnight oil if you have to.
Yeah. And we see it with people where there's some people who have a job, they have a job description, but when you actually ask them, what do you do at your job? It's not just their job description. It's the description plus 2 other job descriptions at times, right? You know, they're doing the jobs of multiple people. That is a thing. Like, I literally have friends I talk to, I'm like, wow, that's intense. Did you?
I think it's capitalism.
Yeah, right? The system, kind of, right?
We just learned, I mean, the U.S. is built off of human capital, and you have to capitalize yourself. And
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
I think, taking a little thread of each of those, is that America is a little bit more of, we're disjointed from our families because we travel so much, and consequence of that is we're more of networkers rather than community. So like a community cares about the people. So in Europe, when you hire a maid, you're concerned about whether her kids are going to school, whether they have shoes, and whether they have pencils, and you pay them for that. The employer often does that. In America, we're networkers where we want to you have one job. We want to know if this maid is going to clean our house and how well she's going to do it, and we're going to pay her for that service.
For the service.
So, yes, for that service.
Yeah.
So there's this different kind of you were saying, social fabric. And then it does have trade-offs because, like Americans who move to Europe, they feel obligated to do that, and so it's just like, well, I'm not interested in that stuff. So in any event, it's like this networking versus the community, and I think the fact that we're so, our families we're so transient and we move so much that we don't have that grounding from that generational family, that kind of
That's deep.
is a cause for.
And I think it's kind of like you're hitting. It's funny how some of these answers, right? It comes back to this like systemic way of thinking, this systemic ideology that's kind of culturally accepted, right? Amongst all of us. Pedro, you guys.
No, you say spend more. In order to spend more, you gotta work more. And
Yeah. And, right. Even sometimes at the bare minimum, right? It kind of goes back to that. In order to spend more of what I want, I have to therefore work more, right? So I gotta work more hours so I can get more money so that I could therefore buy this house, live in this neighborhood, put my kids in this school, do these things, right? That is a thing. So as much as there's probably a systemic issue with this, there's also like a personal issue with this, right? And all these things have drastic effects on us as individuals, our families, and everything. Especially since most households, both parents work, right? Most households, both parents are working, so even that creates another strand, right? In this workaholic lifestyle, the Bible encourages us to be intentional about your time. Intentional about your time. And not just on a yearly basis or he says on a weekly basis. The Bible calls us to be intentional about rest, worship, and leisure. And I know sometimes that can be just some uncomfortable words to say here in America. Rest, worship, and leisure. 9 times out of 10, when you say rest and leisure, people think lazy. Right? Lazy. But the Bible expects us to be intentional on a weekly basis about these things. It says it. Right? And so as we consider what it means to organize our lives around Jesus, because again, we make these grand goals at the end of the year. I want to do this new year. This is my plan. And I'm like, we need to scale it back and we need to ask ourselves, where is Jesus? I need to center my life around Jesus. I need my priorities to center and focus on leading me closer to him, to having a deeper knowledge, a deeper relationship, and a deeper understanding of him and God's will for my life here on earth, right? And so as we're doing that, having a healthy vision for our lives in 2020, we need to understand this concept of rest from a biblical perspective. You know, many of us live an unbalanced life, and we know it. We know that our lives are unbalanced. We know that sometimes it can lean more in one direction than it does in the other in terms of work and rest, right? We see that. We spend too much time doing things that in the long run do not pay off and do not add to the things that we truly cherish and care about. That we truly care about. And we don't spend enough time doing the things that we would say, if I asked you, what are your values? What are the things that you care most about? And then if I looked at your schedule, would your schedule confirm your values? Would your schedule, not your written schedule, but your actually things that you live out, what you do on a daily basis, would that confirm the values that you claim to have? Do you make intentional time for the things that you really say you love and care about? If I ask you, who's this person that you love the most? And then do I look at your schedule, do I see that you really carve out time in your schedule to be with that person that you love the most? Right? This is a real thing. And I think it's something for us to examine. Vacation time goes unused. Family time is underutilized. And worship time is often neglected. It's easy to neglect these things. And society ends up unbalanced. It ends up unbalanced. And at the end of the day, we all end up unbalanced when we live lives like this. And so the key to finding this level of balance in our lives is to have a well-ordered life. And what does that look like for me to have a well-ordered life? And God was intentional about this pattern that he set up for all of us to live. And so we're going to really start digging into some of these things. And I hope you guys are ready for this. We're going to really define this concept. And through kind of defining this, we want to examine the Sabbath. God talks about the Sabbath. So we're going to be digging into the Sabbath today, okay? Y'all ready for this?
Yes.
All right, here we go. So the Sabbath, in all honesty, when you really look at it, it really is intended to bring that balance in our lives. That's the purpose of it. It was to bring balance in our lives and in our time, right? We look at Mark chapter 2, verse 27. Mark 2, verse 27. Jesus is confronted by the Pharisees for, healing a man on the Sabbath. And it says, then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for who? Man. That's really deep there. I mean, that we're going to talk a little about that. He says the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. And so he says, this was made for you, not the other way around. Why did he say that, right? We got to examine. Why did he have to make this statement? If you examine the Bible and you go back to first century and how the Pharisees lived out the Sabbath, it was jam-packed with rituals and things that you could not do. We're going to dig more into that a little bit later in the message. But it got to the point where the Sabbath was burdensome because you were more focused on not messing up than enjoying the time of rest. It was like, I can't do this, can't do that. Can I touch this? Can I not touch that? Can I go here? Can I not go there? Well, I need to get upstairs. Can I use the elevator? Can I not use, this was literally the thing that people had to really think about because these rules were put on them. And so Jesus said, this was made for your benefit. The Sabbath was made for your benefit, for your development, for your enjoyment, for your fulfillment, not the other way around. In Luke 6, and this is when we're going to really kind of dig into some of this. Luke 6, 1 through 5, it says, on the Sabbath, while going through the grain fields, his disciples plucked and ate some herds of grain, rubbing them in their hands. I love this scripture because it really talks about how Jesus was kind of survived in a lot of ways, him and his disciples. This is such a side note, but if you go back to the Old Testament gives a law that when you go through your crops, you go through it only one time, right? And then you leave whatever falls on the floor, you leave that for the foreigners and the homeless, so that they have something to eat as well. And so it was this forethought that was meant to feed those who were foreign and not from this land, and those who were homeless, they were able to eat from that. And that's the same thing that provided provision and food for Jesus, right? I always think that's a cool thing. Like, what was intended to help the poor is what fed our Lord, right? And just that mindset of being that considerate. And so side note, you can take that. Continue on, it says, but some of the Pharisees said, why are you doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath? And Jesus answered them, have you not read what David did when he was hungry? He and those men who were with him, how he entered the house of God and took and ate the bread of presence, which is not lawful for anyone but the priest to eat, and also gave it to those who was with him? And he said to them, the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. And this is deep here. Because Jesus is like, you guys are so caught up on this. What about when David walked in the temple and ate the bread? I mean, that would have looked like, whoa, what are you doing? But he walked in, took the bread, ate the bread, and not just him. You could say, well, he's the king. He gave it to the other guys. So it's like, well, wait a minute, you're just breaking all the rules here. Jesus is like, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. Jesus, especially the Pharisee Jews, and especially in the Pharisee days, it was in order to not break the law, they made extra rules to protect them from breaking the law. Right? And now, does that sound malicious in intent? It does? I don't think, right? But the goal is to make sure we don't break the law. And so it's like, if the cliff falling off the cliff is there, maybe I should put a sign here that says don't pass here. Yeah. Right? Versus putting a sign there where it's probably, if you're that close, it'll never be the same, right? Like, so I'm going to put the sign here to protect you, right? The intention was not malicious. But eventually, what happened? It wasn't just the sign was here. They put another sign about 30 yards. It wasn't there. Like, and if you cross here, you're going to get, fined, And again, the intention was like, man, we want to make sure you don't fall. But in doing that, you created all these rules and regulations that people forgot. Why am I even following this sign? And I think this is important, and this even goes into what we're going to be discussing Wednesday and things that I just want us as a church to always be mindful of. We got to understand the intent behind scriptures before we start just enforcing the law of the scripture. There is some danger when we enforce things without teaching the intention behind it. Right. There's some danger, because what happens is your way of enforcing that might not even match the intention of why it was put there. And so you got to examine, why was this written? Why is this the law? Because you start creating all these other laws, and then people are like exhausted. Sabbath is not a time of rest. It is a final exam at the end of every week that you got to pass. And that is not stress-free, right? When it came to the Sabbath, the rules were set down, and people struggled. They wanted to take rest seriously, but out of fear of getting it wrong, they went too far. They wanted to take rest seriously, but out of fear of getting it wrong, they went too far. The Pharisees, blinded by their own rules and regulations, refused to see the truth of what God was intending for them to follow. And the Sabbath was turned into a burden rather than a gift. And in all honesty, it seems that way, that we've moved in that direction today, where the Sabbath is more of a burdensome than it is a gift. Even thinking to take a day off, period, in your week, some people are like, that's not possible. Like, that is unrealistic. I have many things I need to do. Matter of fact, I don't have that luxury to have that mindset. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. When we feel as though the Sabbath may sound nice, but we can't do it because we value having a busy life. We really do. I think, and especially as Americans, we value having a busy life. It isn't because we're afraid of being a Pharisee. That's not why we don't consider the practice of what Jesus is teaching with the Sabbath. It's because we can't say no to anyone or anything except God. I think it's easy for us to say yes to other people and to other things, but it's very easy for us to say no to God. It's so easy for us to say no to God. It's easy to say no to God and yes to your boss. It's easy to say no to God and say yes to your schedule. It's easy to say no to God and say yes to your programs that you have to do, to other people, but God can wait. That's how we feel. Like, God can wait. He'll be okay, God will be fine, but I got to say yes to my boss. I got to say yes to this schedule. I got to say yes to this program. I got to say yes to these things. I got to say yes to these chores. I got to say yes to all these other things. And we put God consistently on the back burner. Yeah. We put the things of God consistently on the back burner. And so we fill our lives, we fill our plates, and when they're overflowing, and then here's the great irony of it all. We have these busy schedules, and then we turn around and what? We complain, right? About how busy things are, how stressed I am. I don't have no time for anything, and I'm just overwhelmed. And sometimes we don't stop and ask, how much of this stuff have we just taken on ourselves without ordering our lives around the way God has called us to order our lives? If you are to be successful in observing the Sabbath or even observing a day of rest, you are going to have to say yes to God. You are going to have to make God and make Him a priority in your life. Now, as I talk about this Sabbath thing, let me make some clear clarifications here. All right? 7 things I really want to clarify about this, because it's not like I'm trying to institute Sabbath in our church. But there are some things that we can glean from this and understanding that could benefit our lives right now, right? So some thoughts on the Sabbath I think is important for us to understand. The first thing is it's a personal choice, right? It's a personal choice, right? Romans 14 verse 5 says this: one person considers one day more sacred than another. Another considers every day alike. Each of them should be fully convinced in their own mind. Whoever regards one day as special does so to the Lord. Whoever eats meat does so to the Lord. If they give thanks to God, and whoever abstains does so to the Lord and gives thanks to God. We got to understand that. That's point blank period. If people consider that day holy or not, whatnot, that's up to them and God. It's important to understand that. The scripture explicitly states that. He's making reference to even a Sabbath observant, right? There with that. So that's really important. The first thing we got to say is don't judge anyone. And we get caught up in that. We love to be critical and judge other people and what they're doing. You know, we judge people. Even here it says if some person chooses to eat meat, that's them to God. Don't judge them. Don't get critical of them. Let them do what they got to do. But everyone, we love it. We love the kind of, I'm better than you because I do this. Right? The second thing is, like what I'm saying, don't judge. Right? Don't judge. Right? Colossians 2:16. It says, therefore, do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regards to religious festivals, a new moon celebration, or a Sabbath day. These are a shadow of things that were to come. The reality, however, is found in who?
Christ Jesus.
It's found in Christ. It's the scripture. I'll just finish the scripture. It's found in Christ, right? It was in trick 10. It's found in Christ. And this is important for us to understand, and we're going to examine how these things are foreshadowing and what it foreshadows to. And I've got some cool things to kind of illustrate that, but we'll get into that. Third thing is the Sabbath was part of the Old Testament law, right? It was actually part of what they called in the Old Testament, there's two ways of looking at the law. It was split in two columns. You have the moral law, which is lying, cheating, stealing, murder, and all that type of stuff. It's moral law. But you also have ceremonial law. And ceremonial law was, dietary restrictions, circumcision, things in that nature, and sacrifices, and obviously the Sabbath, right? These are in that area. And it's funny because if you look at the 10 Commandments, all the commandments actually fall into the moral law realm, except for the 10th, which falls into the ceremonial law. In that way. But again, so yes, there is like a doing away with that. Like we don't have to follow that because of Jesus, right? It talks more about that as well. But I say all that to say is we have to have balance in our perspectives as we go through a lot of these things, right? It's all about the intention.
Right.
And are we following the heart of what these scriptures are teaching us, right? And reality is this, the fourth thing is this, the early church didn't observe the Sabbath. Contrary to popular demand, Sunday is not the last day of the week. Sunday is actually what? It's the first day of the week, right? Most people think it's the other way around. And you can look at these scriptures right here that kind of confirm that. People say, well, what we're doing right here is not an attempt to honor Sabbath. This is when we get together to worship the Lord on the first day of the week. So that's something really important to understand. The other thing is the Sabbath was exclusively for the Jews. And you see this in Exodus 31, verse 13. You can read through that. He says clearly, I say to you Israelites, you must observe my Sabbath. It's the sign between me and you for generations to come, so that you know that I am the Lord who makes you holy. That is deep, and we're going to examine that a little bit more in the message. There is no recording in the Bible subscribing Gentiles to honor and to practice the Sabbath, right? There's no record of that in the New Testament scriptures. Matter of fact, Hebrews 8:13 says, by calling this the new covenant, he has made the first one obsolete. So the first one's obsolete. And what is obsolete is outdated and will soon disappear. And so now some people make this argument that say things like, well, Jesus practiced the Sabbath. Therefore, if Jesus did it, what we should, right? We're disciples of Jesus, right?
No.
Okay, why is it not true?
Jesus was a Jew, we're Christians.
Exactly. Right? And I think that's the big thing. Jesus he hadn't fulfilled the law yet while he was living. He hadn't fulfilled what he came to do. What he did on the cross ended that. Right? And so that's why we don't have to subscribe to this. So again, some of this stuff that I'm trying to teach us is things that even help equip us in further conversations in future places. These are things that you have to understand about Sabbath, right? It's important to kind of understand that. Also, here's another thing. 6, even with that, there is a level of respect. Respect those who do. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 8:9, be careful, however, that is this right? Okay, be careful that the exercise of your rights does not become a stumbling block to the weak. Weak people are people who set up unnecessary laws. It's kind of like people who set up, not unnecessary laws, but other things to protect them.
Right.
Other people have things that they have to protect themselves from, things that they can't cross over. And we have to respect that. If it helps them to be who they need to be, to honor God, then that is worthy of respect. Now, we all need to grow and mature in our knowledge and wisdom of the Lord as we encourage with great patience and gentle instruction, which is what the Bible teaches us to do. We help people not condemning them.
Right.
And there's a lot of areas in this where even as a church, you see us practice this. There are people who have different places and they have different struggles. They come from a different spot. So you can't just force feed, well, this is how you need to do it. The Bible says this, you need to get in line. That's not how the Bible calls us to work with each other. With great patience, gentle instruction, we help people, we mature people through this process. But there has to be a whole understanding of how we go about this. That's really important. This practice, and you've seen us do this in the church. We've done this in areas where some opinion matters, where it could look like, well, this is an opinion thing. And certain people have views on how it should look, and other people have different views on how it should look. But what do? We don't discount anyone's views. We consider and we work with people. That's how we practice it as a church. That's how the Bible calls us to practice all these type of things when it comes to these type of issues. And the final one is the 7th one here, is we should observe the principle of rest. I said all that to get to this part. This is what I really want to talk about. And my question to you is this: do you have a day each week devoted to rest? Do you have a day each week that's devoted to rest? It's strictly devoted to rest. I want us to kind of watch this video. Kind of helps illustrate a little bit more of this concept of the Sabbath.
The number 7 is a big deal in the Bible.
Yeah, in biblical Hebrew, the word 7 is connected to the idea of fullness or completeness.
And that's something we all long for, but don't often experience. Instead, we find ourselves working endlessly, fighting back chaos with no real rest.
Yes. Now keep all that in mind as we turn to Genesis 1 in the Bible. It begins with darkness and disorder, but then God speaks to bring about light and order so that life can flourish.
And this happens over the course of 6 days.
Each day is marked with the phrase, there was evening and there was morning. But on the 7th day, something special happens.
God stops and rests.
Right. Creation is brought to its completion on the 7th day. And that phrase, there was evening and there was morning, it doesn't appear on day 7.
It's like a day with no end.
On the 7th day, God's presence fills his creation. The land provides for all of God's creatures, including humans, who are appointed to rule the world with God forever.
Kings and queens of the 7th day rest. I can get into that.
But the humans are deceived by a dark power, and they forfeit that rest. They're exiled into the wilderness, where they have to work as slaves to the land.
Until they die and return to the dust from which they came.
But God wants to restore humanity back to that 7th day rest. So he chooses to give the family of Israel that experience of ultimate rest so they can share it with others.
But How? They're in Egypt, slaves to an oppressive empire who's grinding them into the dust.
So God confronts Egypt and he liberates the Israelites, taking them through the darkness and chaos on the way to the promised land.
Now, while they're on their way, they find themselves in the wilderness. It's easy to get lost. Life is a struggle. They're not in the land of rest yet.
But while they're on the way, God invites them in the wilderness to start living as if they're in the promised land.
But how do you practice the future rest in the wilderness?
Well, God tells them that every seventh day they are to stop their work, or in Hebrew, to Shabbat, so that they can rest and enjoy God's good world.
So take a whole day to live as if the ultimate rest has already come.
Yeah, this is the Sabbath, celebrated every week on the seventh day. But there's more. The Sabbath is just one of 7 festivals that Israel practiced every year, each one anticipating that seventh-day rest.
That is a lot of sevens.
And there's even more. Every 7 years, the Israelites were to liberate slaves, forgive debts, and let the land rest for a whole year. And then, every 7 times 7 years was the ultimate seventh-day rest, called the Year of Jubilee. If anyone had lost their land or gone into debt, all was forgiven, everything restored.
Also the Sabbath, these feasts, the Year of Jubilee, it's all pointing towards the hope of future rest.
Right. Now, when the Israelites went into the land, they forgot their God, and so they forfeited their chance for rest in the promised land.
They're exiled and enslaved again by an oppressive nation, led back into a world of chaos and disorder.
But Israel's prophets said that their exile would end one day, and that the ultimate jubilee of freedom and rest would come, but generations go by, and they're still waiting.
It's at this dark point in the story that Jesus appears, and he launches his public mission on a Sabbath day.
Yeah, he read aloud from the scroll of Isaiah, saying that it was time for all captives and slaves to be released, because this was the year of the Lord's favor.
What did he mean, this is the year of the Lord's favor?
He was talking about the ultimate jubilee.
Also, Jesus is claiming that seventh-day rest would come through him.
Right, he said that he was the Lord of the Sabbath, and he confronted disorder and darkness in all of its forms, liberating people from sickness, sin, even from death itself.
Yet, Jesus was killed, so even his work was undone.
Well, it seemed that way. But notice, Jesus timed his death to take place at the end of the week. His body rested in a tomb during the Sabbath, and on the 8th day, he rose from the dead.
Oh wait, the 8th day? You mean the first day of a new week?
Exactly. Jesus' resurrection was like the first day of a new creation, where God's light and life broke into the darkness.
So because of the resurrection, we have hope in God's promise of future rest. But we're not there yet. It's like we're still in the wilderness, where we experience struggle and pain.
But as we journey towards that ultimate seventh day, Jesus invites us to experience a taste of real rest now by following him. Or in his words, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest."
And think about this concept, right, of rest. And even the reframing of how Christ reshaped that concept of rest, right? It says in Matthew 11:28, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, I will give you rest. Take upon my yoke and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. You will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Come to me, take my yoke, and learn from me." These are the things that he says there repeatedly. And you will find rest. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. And you will find rest. The question we have to ask ourselves is, do we really believe that? You know, think about this when he shared, right? Like, can you imagine what if our society ran like that? We had our 7-day rest. We had our 7 festivals to focus on a period of just enjoying fellowship, enjoying our relationships, and enjoying what God has given us. And imagine if we had that 7-year jubilee where all your debt was forgiven, right? Everyone who lost land was going to get land back. How would that make us feel as a people? Hope, I like that word a lot. Hopeful. Anyone else? Is that something that anyone would want? Or do we enjoy this system that we have of struggle, decay, and depression? You know, like, and I think this is such a, to me, for us, and it's so funny, when I was preparing this message, I was like, it's such a foreign topic here to even consider rest like this. Like, it's just like, it's not even realistic. It actually seems ridiculous in some way, shape, or form. Could there ever be such a time, a year of Jubilee in America? A year, really? Like, cancel all debts? Like, it's just, what? Could there really be, like, is that actually possible? The thought of it is heaven. But that was the intention that God was trying to create. He wanted to create his people to have this experience that you are preparing, you are practicing for heaven.
Amen.
This is heaven. Now, here's the thing with rest that I think is really important for us to all understand. You know, me and my wife was actually reading this really good book last year called Sacred Rest. And I picked it up and I've been kind of reading through it as well. And it's really unique because we have an idea of what rest is. But I don't think we really know how to rest. I don't think we really understand how to rest. I think some of us think sleeping in or binging on Netflix is rest. You know what I mean? But that's not really rest. There's a specific way that we could go about getting rest. So what I want to do is, I want to share this quote from the book. It's actually a really good quote. She says here, rest is not merely taking a break. Rest is about replenishing, restoring, renewing, reclaiming, rebuilding, and regenerating, remolding, and repairing. Rest begins with the prefix re, because it requires us to go back to a prior state. It is a second chance. It's an opportunity to put back in order anything that has shifted out of alignment with God's best. And I think this is really deep when we really examine what is rest. And you even ask yourself, do you even know how to rest? I think if we're honest, a lot of us don't know how to rest. We know how to work. We know how to work. We don't know how to rest. And this is so sad because it destroys us. Because if we don't know how to rest, but we know how to work, that means we're not getting the replenishing, the restoring, the renewing, the recovering, the rebuilding, the regenerating, the remolding, the repairing that we so badly need. We're not getting that. And so it's important for us to really understand that. I want to play a clip from her TED Talk that she actually gave recently, where she actually defined a lot of what it looks like to rest, right? So, I hope it's fine. There it is. Okay. Okay.
Have you ever tried to fix your chronic lack of energy by getting more sleep, only to wake up still feeling exhausted? If that's you, here's the secret. Sleep and rest are not the same thing. We have incorrectly combined the concepts of sleep and rest, and in doing so, we have dumbed down rest to the point it appears ineffective. You see, sleep is only one part of the big picture. It's only one of the 7 types of rest. Many of us are going through life thinking we have rested because we have slept, but in reality, we are missing out on the other types of rest that we need. The result is a culture of high-achieving, high-producing, chronically tired, burned-out individuals. Many of us are suffering from a rest deficit because we do not understand the power of rest. Rest is the most underused, chemical-free, safe, and effective alternative therapy available to us. Every activity you do requires energy, and most of that energy is not merely physical. When your boss calls you into the office to discuss a problem, you steel yourself for the potential conflict, and in doing so, you draw from your emotional and social energy. When you're stuck in traffic, you're using mental and sensory energy to process your surroundings. And when your team asks for your car keys, you draw from your creative and spiritual energy as you pray for a great excuse to say no. The first step to conquering your rest deficit requires you to identify where you are using the most energy in your day. Then, you can focus your attention on getting the type of rest needed to restore those specific areas. Rest should equal restoration in one of the 7 areas. If your definition of rest is comprised of sleeping or lying on the couch binge watching an entire season of a TV series, you leave yourself open to chronic exhaustion. It is no surprise that the workplace is a major source of stress. In a recent study led by Deloitte, it indicated that a majority of workers have no passion for their jobs. In one report, over half of those surveyed believed their jobs to be the reason for their insomnia. According to a Stanford study, the workplace is estimated to be the 5th biggest cause of death in the United States. I believe our lack of passion, our sleepless nights, and our overwhelming fatigue are all the results of our uncorrected rest deficits. So once you identify that you have a rest deficit, the next step is to learn about the 7 types of rest and how to get more of each of them. Do you know that coworker who comes to work every day with a huge cup of coffee? He's often irritable, easily distracted, and has a difficult time concentrating on his work. He struggles to brainstorm new ideas and is constantly forgetting things. He seems like he's just going through the motions to get a paycheck. When he goes home at night to go to sleep, he has a hard time turning off his brain as conversations from the day fill his thoughts. Eventually, he does fall asleep, but despite sleeping 7 to 8 hours, he wakes up feeling as if he never went to bed. This person has a mental rest deficit. What is needed is some downtime for him to quiet his mind. But the good news is he doesn't have to quit his job or go on vacation to accomplish this. Mental rest can be achieved by putting technology to work for you. He can schedule short breaks to occur throughout his workday every 2 hours. These pre-planned breaks will remind him to stop and slow down long enough to calm his mind. Mental rest techniques can also include keeping a notepad by the bed to jot down those nagging thoughts that keep a person awake at night. Our burned out coworker is also in need of more sensory rest. The bright lights, computer screens, the background noise of phones ringing and multiple conversations going on in the office can all cause our senses to be overwhelmed. If left unchecked, this can lead to sensory overload syndrome. But this can easily be avoided by something as simple as closing your eyes for a few moments in the middle of your busy day. Next, turn off the radio on your drive home from work. And intentionally unplug from your electronics at the end of each day. These intentional moments of sensory deprivation can begin to undo the damage inflicted by our overstimulating world. The third type of rest is creative rest. This type of rest reawakens the childlike awe and wonder inside of each of us. Do you recall the first time you saw the Grand Canyon, the Great Lakes, the beach, or Niagara Falls? Allowing yourself to take in the beauty of these settings are all moments of creative rest. But creative rest isn't simply about appreciating the beauty of nature. It also includes time spent enjoying the arts. You can transform your workspace into a place of inspiration with images of places you love and works of art that speak to you. You can't spend 40 hours a week staring at beige walls and expect to feel passionate about anything, much less come up with innovative, out-of-the-box ideas. Creative professionals understand this, and that's why their office space tends to look like this and not like this. Now, let's take a look at another individual. This is that friend everyone thinks is the nicest person they have ever met. It's the person everyone depends on, the one you would call if you need a favor, because even if they don't want to do it, you know they would give you a reluctant yes rather than a truthful no. They hate confrontation and would do anything to avoid it. But when they are alone, they often feel unappreciated and as if others are taking advantage of them. This person is in need of more emotional rest, so she can freely express her feelings and eliminate exhausting, people-pleasing behavior. Emotional rest would require her to have the courage to lean into the uncertainty of authenticity. An emotionally rested person answers the question, "How are you today?" with a truthful, "I'm not okay," and then shares the hard things that often go unsaid. An emotional rest deficit and a social rest deficit often coexist. This occurs when we fail to differentiate between those relationships that revive us from those that exhaust us. Research suggests we have mirror neurons that allow us to receive the emotional information of others. So if you surround yourself with negative, depressed people, you will soon start feeling like them. To experience more social rest, surround yourself with positive, supportive people. Make time for friends who want nothing more than to be in your presence, and eliminate those relationships that are just virtual from being your priority, and prioritize face-to-face relationships. The final type of rest is spiritual rest, which is the ability to connect beyond the mental and the physical, to have a deep sense of belonging, love, acceptance, and purpose. Engage in something greater than yourself in your day-to-day routine, such as prayer, community. So you see, sleep alone could never restore us to the point where we feel rested. For the past 5 years, we have been discussing a sleep revolution, and we are just as tired as when that conversation first began. Now that I've shared the 7 types of rest, it's time we begin to focus on getting the right type of rest. It's time for a rest revolution. Thank you.
And so, in that, she gives these 7 types of rest that are really important for us all to kind of be able to step back and ask ourselves, what do I need? I'm going to have Bruce send out a link to the email, the Mercer email, she actually has a test on her website. If you go to that, you can fill out, it's a quick survey, but it'll actually give you a snapshot of where you're at and which one you're probably most deprived of. And then you can kind of find ways to focus specifically on those things. So Bruce will be sending that out later today. If you're not signed up on the email list, you can go to the website and you can register your email there, and you'll make sure you'll get that as well. But this is unique. I mean, it was funny when I was reading this last year, it was probably one of the things that sparked me to feel like I need some time to get away and have some time to think. And, luckily my wife, being as awesome as she is, it was creative. I was really low on the creative side of it. And my wife actually planned a time for me to go away for a weekend up in a treehouse. She found some random treehouse at an Airbnb, and she sent me away there to kind of just spend the weekend to get away and to have some space to be creative and to think away from these things. And reality is this, guys, we need these type of things in our lives. And sometimes we can get caught up in this mindset of, I just need to work, I need to do this, and there are immense pressures on us. But even the Bible talks about this, where it says in 1 Peter 1:16, it commands that God commands for us to take a day and set it aside to be holy. Like, take a day and set it aside to be holy. And the reason that's so powerful when you take these times to kind of examine, where do I need rest? What does rest look like for me? How do I apply these types of rest? You're able to really be rejuvenated in the things that God has called you to be rejuvenated in, to spend time that day enjoying the goodness of God and the things that God has given us. It's so important. You know, there's this thing, like they say, like Sabbath is like an antidote to worldliness, right? And I remember reading this quote back in one of my classes before. It says this, and D. Cunningham is not me, but it's, you know, it's kind of cool. Anyway, because this guy is actually he's a teacher at school. But he says this. It's really cool. It says it states that, you know, Sabbath states that no matter how hard you work, no matter what you do, it isn't action or works that make you right with God, but rather faith. When we remember to set aside a day and keep it holy, we grow in our faith in God because we begin to realize how absolutely inadequate our own works are and how absolutely perfect the work of Jesus Christ on the cross was. Yeah. And that's so big for us to remember that. Yeah. That your work only produces so much. And at the end of all that you can do, you're still left drained. Right. And so you need time to set aside, intentional time, to make God a priority and to make the things and the blessings that God has given you a priority. It breaks my heart to see how many families don't spend time with their family on a weekly basis. There are families that go weeks and don't really spend time with each other. Quality time, intentional time. Not, we're on the way to this event time. We're trying to get things out the house time, but we spend time, we have intentional time to sit down and enjoy time together. Every Monday, and the guys know this, every Monday I spend time, we have intentional family time, where it's either a game night or it's a movie night, but it's a family time. It's a time that I spend with my family. That is so important for your family. You need to, and your family should know it. My kids will let me know. It is Monday, family time, where are you at? You need to get home. It's Monday movie night, we're trying to finish Star Wars, what's going on? Like, you can ask like they know it. They hold me accountable. They look forward to it. That's important. Do you have intentional time set aside for you and your family on a weekly basis? Do you set time aside for you and your spouse on a weekly basis to cultivate and mature that relationship? Like, this is important. God has blessed us with incredible things. Friends, family, relationships, people. Do you invest in that? And probably some of the source of your stress, your pain and your angst is because that is not a priority. The things of God are not a priority in your life. We all acknowledge God gave us these things. God gives us our friends. He gives us our family. He gave that to me. But then we turn around and we're like, well, I got to do this stuff. Yeah. Thanks, God, but. And we don't enjoy it. So as we take our communion today and we reflect on what Jesus did on the cross and how he says, because of what I did on the cross, I invite you into my rest. Yeah. I invite you into this. Take my yoke. Learn from me, he says. My burden is light. I want us to meditate on this. You can read this. It's homework. I challenge you all to take on this homework. All right? A day this week to do this, and we're going to pray for communion. We're going to take communion together. But I want you to read this homework, and I really want you to find some time this week, to make this a reality. All right? Let's go to God in prayer for our communion. Dear God, we thank you so much today for just the opportunity that you gave us to walk into your rest. You know, I reflect on the first video where it just talks about the year of Jubilee and how the intention of the Sabbath was to really give us a taste of heaven, a taste of that we could truly know that you are in control of all, that I don't have to worry. I could enjoy the fruits of this earth. I could enjoy the fruits of my friends. I can enjoy the fruits of my family. I can enjoy the fruits of being able to spend time reading my word, reflecting on you, falling asleep and waking up, and just enjoying these things. I pray, God, that we don't forego the cross as just another moment that now we get heaven. Because of the cross, the only thing we get is heaven. But because of the cross, we are able to walk in your rest right now on earth. That we could create and carve out a space of heaven right now. We could do that. I pray that we spend time to, instead of setting up our weeks behind our work schedules, we first put the first thing down is, this is a day dedicated to the Lord, and I'm making it holy. And then everything else is oriented around that. My classes, my work schedule, my personal gym time, whatever. Everything else is oriented around that, rather than the other way around, where we fill up with class and work and all these things, and then we're like, well, can I get to midweek? Can I get to this church thing? Can I do these things? Can I? I don't know. Maybe we'll figure it out. I pray we make our time with you holy. We thank you for the cross, the blood that was shed, your body that was broken. And I pray that this time of meditation on that could lead us into a deeper level of rest with you. We pray all this in Jesus' name.